Veggie Wagon referenced in a YouTube video by ThrabenU? More likely than you think. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video. And today's video is going to be pretty weird because I Hate Names has given me a rather interesting challenge. And this challenge actually starts with a short by content creator Veggie Wagon, who is very well known within the EDH/Commander community. I'm not going to play the audio of this clip for copyright reasons, but I am sharing this with permission from Veggie Wagon himself. And the general idea was to play Multani's presence as a card draw engine, where you go and you mess around with this combined with Vexing Bauble. And this is a very, very unusual way of accruing card advantage. So there is also Blood Funnel, which works a similar way. And now today we're going to see, can we brew something that actually takes advantage of these effects that is at least somewhat competitive by Legacy standards? So today I want to mess around with a handful of ideas for how you might be able to build around this. And to start with, I'd like to show off a little bit of gameplay from a deck called Cheerios. I just grabbed this list from an old The Epic Storm video, nothing too groundbreaking here. The general idea for any sort of Cheerios style deck list, and this belongs to that older generation of bad legacy names that don't really explain what the deck does. The idea is that you play a glimpse of nature effect of some kind, and there's a handful of similar effects that require another color, such as blue, that do something similar. And you churn through your deck using a large number of zero-cost creatures, drawing a card every time. You ultimately go and tap a Gaia's Cradle for a decent amount of mana, and then you end up with enough mana to do something broken. Sometimes this will be a storm card such as Eve Progenitor Ooze. Sometimes you'll end up with a Grape Shot. You could do something like give all your various zero-cost creatures some amount of power and toughness. You can keep casting things off the top of your library. You've got some options. But before we even get into this idea, let's see how a base Cheerios deck should, in theory, function. And just to do this now, today's video, as always, is sponsored by TOAMagic.com. Tales of Adventure is an awesome store. Should you need any cards, use promo code ThrabenU. You'll get free shipping and save 5% on your order. So, let's begin. Okay, so we are in the tournament practice room. We're just going to goldfish a couple of hands with this deck so you can get a feel about how a normal Cheerios deck operates. You do something like exile a spirit guide and cast a glimpse of nature. Now at this point, every single 1 mana spell that you do starts drawing you cards. And at some point, you can hit another glimpse of nature, and these things will start netting you cards. You will start drawing 2 each time. Yeah? We do have to kind of hit something relevant soon. So yeah. Let's go ahead and just Summoner's Pact for... Oh, it has to be a green creature. Whoops. Right. Well, whatever. The Wild Cantor will replace itself. So we can keep going here. Yeah. There's a Rite of Harmony. I don't have the mana to do that. So we get one more attempt here to draw something like a Gaia's Cradle, Lotus Petal. Okay, we're gonna die to our own pact this time. Whoops. Let's try again. Okay, second goldfish attempt. I'm just gonna wait one turn for the sake of a video here and end up with another 0-cost creature in hand before I start going, because we don't want to just sit here and watch me fizzle all day, right? So we will go ahead and cast our Glimpse of Nature. This time we also have a Rite of Harmony, and now we're going to draw 2 cards every time. We'll yield to this trigger, and we'll start trying to just turn through our deck, each one of these giving us 2 cards now, rather than just 1. And as we churn through our deck, we are going to gain the ability to do more and more and more broken things as time goes on. So for example, we've got a Gaia's Cradle that we can tap for 4 mana here. And we could already do something like just play an Eve and like just be good enough to beat most reasonable draws from our opponents here. So we do our Storm thing, and we create a very large number of oozes, each one of them getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we also could continue going from here. At this point, we could hit an Explore, do another Gaia's Cradle, and potentially find a way to even win this turn. So this is fundamentally what a Cheerios deck is trying to do. So what if we try to put the Vexing Bauble Multani's Presence combo into this shell to give us a little bit more redundancy? What would that look like? Well, let's find out. Now, this video is going to be a lot of trial and error, goldfish things, adjust things, until we get something that seems like it's going to be reasonable. Vexing Bauble plus Multani's Presence is fundamentally different than Glimpse of Nature or Rite of Harmony or Beck Call, in that it requires 2 cards to line up correctly. So mathematically speaking, it's going to be a little bit worse off. So we're going to try throwing a couple of Taigas and a couple of extra Spirit Guides into the deck to see if that's enough to fuel these things and get these going. Let's try a couple of Goldfish games with this, kind of see how this ends up doing for us. So this looks like a very reasonable opening hand. We have multiple Multani's Presence, although we are not necessarily going to be starting off going that direction. So we might get there pretty quickly. And now, do I tap Gaia's Cradle immediately to play a second Glimpse to turn these into draw 2s rather than draw 1s? I think I do. I would love to get a little bit of extra artifact mana to get my stuff going. But unfortunately, that draw 2 did not yield immediate results. We're going to have to pass the turn. However, when our next turn comes around, I shouldn't have played that land. Actually, maybe it's fine. So we'll Multani's Presence into Vexing Bauble. Now our Lotus Petal gets countered, and then Multani's Presence becomes a draw 2. At this point, and we'll always yield to that, every one of our 0-cost spells is now getting countered, netting us a whole bunch of cards. So, assuming that we get some things like some Spirit Guides here to get us started, we can now start doing some relatively disgusting things. And as soon as we hit something like a Grape Shot here, our opponent is going to just die. Hey, there is the Grape Shot. We have Storm Count 14, 15, 16, 17 very easily. This is going to result in a turn 2 Goldfish with this deck. Okay, that's not bad. Just for the sake of confirming that we have it, let's click on a few more cards, get that Storm Count up just a little bit higher. 18. Yeah, so there is 19. And we have multiple Spirit Guides in hand to Grape Shot for lethal at this point, and we didn't even deck ourselves. Now, this may or may not actually be the norm, so let's play a couple of hands with this and see how this actually is in practice. And with this opening hand, we see a fundamental difference between something like the Glimpse of Nature and the Vexing Baubles. The Vexing Baubles are not actively good on their own. We are going to have to mulligan this hand. The Multani's Presences are not actually good on their own. We are going to have to mulligan this hand. The Vexing Baubles are not good on their own. We are going to have to mulligan this hand. And at the point that we are this low on cards, we would almost certainly not win. So, one win, one loss. Let's draw another opening 7. Okay, opening 7. A Multani presence on its own. Well, that's not good. We need to mulligan. A Multani's presence on its own. Well, that's not good. We're going to need to mulligan. This is the 5-card hand. We have a Glimpse of Nature, plus a handful of these things, Vexing Baubles that don't do anything. As a 5-card hand, I would probably keep this putting back 2 Vexing Baubles and not expect to win this game the vast majority of the time, because some amount of the time we are just not going to go and draw lands to get our things started here, which is exactly what we are seeing. The Vexing Bauble not necessarily good by itself, which is something that I've already said. Okay, so this is now turn 5. On turn 5, we could actually start doing our things. Now, I don't know about you, but I would expect that if we are going to turn 5 in Legacy without doing anything that meaningfully interacts with our opponent, even if our opponent is a fair deck, we are probably not going to be winning that game. Now, when we do reach turn 5 here, we do finally have enough mana and enough things going that we can get the Multani's Presence Vexing Bauble engine going and start turning these into multiple card draws per creature. But we're already kind of in the middle of a chain, and we are, generally speaking, very, very close to fizzling, even if these are draw 3s like you are seeing here. But after some initial bad luck, it does seem like at this point we are probably good. I will get one more of these going, and I imagine from here we could go and Goldfish our win. Storm is 16, so with just a couple more plays here, we have 18, 19, 20. Oh, I need another Spirit Guide still. I believe I've played a land this turn. Yeah, I've played a land this turn. And I've used a handful of my green Spirit Guides. We'll find another, though. It's fine. Unless the math works out that I have, like, an incorrect number of card draws available. So, yeah, okay. So now I have Spirit Guide, Grape Shot on turn 5. That's a little slow. Let's do one more sample hand here, just getting a feel for how this plays out. Okay, this time we do have a keepable 7-card hand. So we Spirit Guide, Glimpse of Nature, we Spirit Guide, Glimpse of Nature, and then each one of our 0 drops is a draw 2, meaning that we are going to really power through our deck quickly, and since we haven't made a land drop, a Gaia's Cradle is going to be live this game when we draw one, which is something that we haven't seen in a decent number of these games so far. I am going to play out some Mox Opals and just make some mana with Mox Opals just to make sure that we don't get bottlenecked on mana later. After I've done that, I think we are good with making each one of our 0 drops draw 3 instead. So always yield to that. Always yield to that. We don't need the Lotus Petals anymore. We are already at pretty much lethal Storm here. So this is like 17, 18, 19, 20, Spirit Guide, Grape Shot, and we're good. So, not bad, but let's talk about the deck construction here. So, in those sample goldfishing hands with this like Cheerios, Vexing Bauble, Multani's Presence hybrid strategy, what was the thing that was good? And the answer is Glimpse of Nature. It was the Glimpse of Nature that was getting the chain started. And once the chain was already started, and especially if we had multiple glimpses, then the Vexing Bauble and Multani's Presence could be the mid-game boost that we needed to get to the end game kill. These two cards were making our opening hands relatively bad. Glimpse of Nature is an effect that is relatively hard to replace. And accordingly, this is going to be the best thing. The other things that do this, such as Rite of Harmony or Back Call, tend to be slightly more expensive, or we can replace those things, but it takes us multiple cards to do so. Well, what's the math of lining these two cards up in our opening hand? To do this math, we use what is called a hypergeometric calculator. You can Google hypergeometric calculator MTG, and this is going to be one of your very first results. So as a starting point, let's see how likely we are to find, let's say, just Glimpse of Nature in our opening hand. So we have a deck of 60 cards. We're going to draw 7. There are 4 Glimpse of Natures, and we want to find one of them. So we can see that 40% of the time, we are likely to draw a card that we have 4 copies of in our deck. Now, how do we compare this to drawing an A plus B? Well, we want Vexing Bauble plus Multani's Presence in our opening hand instead. So if we want to do percentage chance of getting copies of card A, Multani's Presence, and copies of card B, Vexing Bauble, this is a multivariate intersect instead. So 60 card decks, copies of A, copies of B, cards drawn, 7. 14% chance. Okay? Let's be a little generous. Let's say that you're going to be on the draw, you're going to get that one extra card, 18%. You don't need it until turn 2, 22%. So mathematically speaking, the chances of you just naturally having these cards together in an opening hand at the beginning of the game, and you really need it in that first turn or two if you are going to be competitive with this as a combo, is, generally speaking, pretty low. So in terms of deck building, if we want to improve this idea, we need to do one of two things. We need to either build more redundancy into these combos to make it that we're more likely to line them up by adding something such as a Blood Funnel, Blood Funeral, whichever it was. That could be another copy of one of the A plus B cards. Or we need to operate in a way where we can tutor for one of these, or where we don't necessarily have to go absolutely turbo. And a slightly different but third option, I suppose, is we just have other ways to make it more likely that we can line these things up, such as drawing a bunch of other cards. So why don't we take another look, a different approach at building around this same idea now? So now we're going to take a different approach, and this was a deck list that was started by Killaby. Notice that I say started. There are 54 cards here, not 60. Killaby got stumped about how to finish out this deck list. The core idea is similar to what we have been doing in this video so far, but not so much with the 0-drop creatures, instead with the 0-drop artifact mana and redraws in the form of Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble. What does this deck offer to us that we were looking for based at the end of kind of the last segment of this video? Well, we are going to see more cards because we have more natural cantrips. We are going to see more cards because we have Echo of Eons plus LED that can give us new draw 7s. And we do have the ability to tutor. Now, is it a safe and reliable tutor? No. But sometimes we don't care about it being safe and reliable, because if we have an LED in play already and we gamble for Echo of Eons, we can always end up with that in our graveyard by discarding our hand. So now what we need to do is fill out the remaining 6 slots in a meaningful way. And this is where it's probably going to take a little bit of experimentation. So the first thing that came to my mind to give ourselves additional redundancy is to play Chalice of the Void. Now, there's a fundamental problem with this. Vexing Bauble is something that we can sacrifice. So towards the end of our chain, if we need some mana, if we need some more artifact mana played out, we can sacrifice the Vexing Bauble in order to do so. Chalice of the Void is a much more permanent effect. It would give us our redundancy in our A plus B, which is something that we are looking for, but we have fewer spirit guides this time around, unless I go and throw in a bunch more spirit guides, but I'm not sure that it makes sense to do so. So I don't think I like that plan. So instead, I want to find more 0-drops for this deck. Preferably some 0-drops that can make mana. And while we have most of the broken artifact mana here, we don't have Mox Diamond yet. So if we go and add in 4 copies of Mox Diamond, that leaves us at 58 cards. And at this point, we can probably just add in a couple of lands to round out the deck for Mox Diamond and call that good. Let's add a final Spire of Industry. This is just an untapped tri-land, by the way. We, in theory, need access to red and green and blue for Echo of Eons, so that's perfectly fine. And then we'll add in one other rainbow land of some kind. How about a City of Brass? It's old school. Very few people are playing Rishadan Port, because Rishadan Port can tap this to deal damage to you. Otherwise, you could play one of the other rainbow lands. All right, let's see how this feels now. So again, we see this problem of the Multani's Presence not doing anything on its own. So we mulligan this. Here we see our mana not working properly. We have a Glimpse of Nature, but not the green mana to get things started. We'll go to 5 cards. Wait, this is not the right deck list. Ignore that. I'm not going to edit that out. Switch deck lists. Why are you not legal? Hold up. I copy and pasted an Epic Storm deck list to start making this one, so I had 5 copies of Echoes of Eons in the deck. All right, Killer Bee Multani deck list. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so we see the Multani's Presence not being good on its own, and this hand doesn't... Well, I guess you could just play an Urza Saga Stumpy hand with something like this. Let's not do that. All right, evaluating this next hand. From Mox, imprint Echo of Eons, play Lotus Petal, play Multani's Presence, and start going? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Urza Saga helps out. So we still Promox, imprint you. Oh wait, I don't have green mana. I needed to Lotus Petal first. Fuck. Abort mission. I'm dumb. Goldfish another hand. Okay, this opening hand. Mox Diamond, discard Urza Saga. Try to do some gamble nonsense. Doesn't quite feel like it's there. This one maybe works out. Vexing Bauble, not currently necessary here. So we're going to play some land. We are going to gamble for an LED, like so. We did not discard the LED. So we go, yeah. I guess I'll imprint this for Metalcraft purposes. Yeah. Blue. Echo for a new draw 7. Cool. So if I play Lotus Petal, I can gamble for something. Let's do that. Lining up Vexing Bauble Multani's Presence here is a little weird. I discard one of them a decent portion of the time, so I think I'm just going to grab another LED. So play another LED. Do Vexing Bauble. Let's sack this for blue. What is the secondary color I would want here? I guess green. We can cast an Echo of Eons, leaving some mana of 2 different colors floating. Now my Vexing Bauble is working against me. I would just sacrifice that. Lol. The timing there is very humorous. Now we can play out a bunch of artifact mana and do a 3rd Echo of Eons. This is a May, so I'm not forced to imprint this card. So we will go sack for blue, Echo of Eons again. There is a Vexing Bauble now. That costs me 1 mana. I still have another mana in play. I have Gamble for Echo again. I think I play this one out first. That gives me 3 total mana. So I'll Vexing Bauble, and then we can start turning these into draw a cards. So yeah, and yeah. So now I have 3 LEDs. I need to keep at least one of these to echo. I probably want 2 of these to echo. So let's do a redraw. And at this point, I need to start thinking about sacking the Vexing Bauble to just gamble echo again. Okay. So now these are mana again. I am at the point where I could just literally gamble the game. Like, gamble for Grape Shot, kill my opponent some proportion of the time. I don't think that's where we're at. This is my last echo, so this is my last draw 7. So we'll go yaw, do red this time, cast another draw 7. Okay, so now we would just gamble for our win condition and hope that we don't discard our Grape Shot. We did not discard our Grape Shot. That is a turn 1 win with this deck, but it felt like I was jumping through a lot of hoops, like I was working hard to do that. Let's see how this lines up in another set of opening hands here. Okay, so we don't quite have enough mana to pull off something cool like an Echo here. This is a perfectly keepable Urza Saga Stompy hand. That's not what we're trying to goldfish and show off here, though, so I'll mulligan this. This hand with Vexing Bauble by itself does not do anything. This hand has Presence plus Bauble, not the mana to get going. On a 5, I would probably just keep this and hope that things turn out. So I would Chrome Mox on turn 1 to play a Multani's Presence. All right. So at this point, we have our 0-cost things with cycling, essentially. So yeah, I would play an Urza Saga. I would pass the turn. There's an Echo. I would love to get an LED. I can do so off of Urza Saga. So we would just kind of slow roll this game a little bit at this point. We would make an Urza Saga construct token. I would, depending on the matchup, make an Urza Saga construct token again. Get my Lion's Eye Diamond. Play a land. I think I value this as a mana later. So just sack that, cast the Echo, and now I can run through and make all of these into redraws. Like, I can just have 5 redraws here. More realistically, what I would probably do at this point is just sack the Vexing Bauble, go play out a very, very large number of artifacts. Yeah, and yeah, and yeah. I would probably just attack for like 9 and then Echo again, meaning that like our Grape Shot is already lethal-ish. So just to kind of show this off, we attack for 9-ish damage, then we just Echo again, and we may or may not get more damage out of that by waiting. So at this point, we could reconvert. Are you actually all colors? Yes. We could reconvert into a Vexing Bauble situation to turn these into redraws, and there would be our Grape Shot for lethal. So that's a turn 3 kill. That's perfectly acceptable. But I don't know if this deck is really smooth yet. It seems like we have a couple of good angles, but I don't know that we're really quite there. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, and honestly, they're just the best at what they do. If you need to keep your deck lists online, this is the way to do it. They have all sorts of different viewing options. You can condense that text if you like things to be tight. You can make them visual grids. You can put them in stacks. You've got all sorts of different ways to kind of view and visualize your deck lists. And they also have some really cool functionality, like allowing you to see playtest hands and even fully playtest your decks. So check them out. All right, so we go back to the drawing board again. What if we try to add in the blood funnels to give our Vexing Baubles a little bit of redundancy? If we do this, we probably want to add in another spirit guide or two so that we can produce mana under the Vexing Bauble. And I'm going to add in a second copy of Grape Shot because it seems like once we get going and doing our thing, we naturally build a ton of Storm, so we just need to find our finisher. So let's see how it feels with this little change now. Okay, this is an opening hand that has both the Multani's Presence and the Vexing Bauble. I think we're going to be happy to keep this. So let's imagine that we slow roll this game a tiny bit, and we start by playing a Vexing Bauble on turn 1. Then, on turn 2, you can go ahead and play our Multani's Presence and turn all of these things into immediate redraws that are going to be building Storm for us. So it's a little weird here in that we are making redraws, but the redraws might not be better than just playing out the artifact mana like we are about to see right now. This is Storm Count 10. This is a relatively large Grape Shot, but I can't Grape Shot and also gamble. So instead, we're just going to crack for red. We're going to grab an Echo. Now, we're going to go ahead and sack these. Let's go blue and red. Do our draw 7. Now we're cooking. So 13, 14, 15. We are a little short of lethal on this Grape Shot. So I have Storm Count of 15, 16, 17. So instead, to keep going, I probably need to hard cast an Echo, unfortunately. Maybe cracking both LEDs there was not actually the line. And at this point, we now need to put the mana into play, or otherwise use some mana. We can flash this back. That's pretty cool. So let's try second Multani's Presence, Vexing Bauble. Now these are draw 2s instead of draw 1s. That's pretty nice. Now we're reaching the point where we can just like find a win condition or find a little bit of mana and be good. We're running out of redraws. It's still okay. I need another mana. So I have a lethal Grape Shot. I have 1 mana. I've already played a land. So I would need to sacrifice Vexing Bauble. Okay, let's try to keep going. Exile this, sacrifice the Bauble, hit Lotus Petal. This is theoretically fine. So, gamble for LED. As long as we don't discard the LED, we can keep going. Sacrifice for blue, blue, blue. Cast an Echo of Eons. Found the Grape Shot. Storm count is above 30. We get there. But there is some tension between wanting this artifact mana in play and wanting the redraws that we get from the Multani's Presence combo. Let's do another hand here. This is an opening hand that I would keep on the merit of just doing Urza's Saga Stompy nonsense. Let's keep one of these, just kind of show what it is capable of. So we do something like a turn 1 Urza's Saga, probably just working on my Metalcraft count here. Oh, this is kind of insane. So we can go and Oh, right, I left that in play. Whoops. My bad. Yeah, I was planning on doing fair Urza Saga nonsense. So instead, I would then this is online. I could Spirit Guide a Multani's Presence at any time. So we would just fish up a new artifact, such as an LED here, and just have approximately a 2-turn clock just based on raw damage and maybe a Grape Shot or an Echo of Eons thing after sacrificing some Vexing Baubles. The Stompy plan is a perfectly viable plan B. That's not really what we're testing here. So with this hand, we can just go bam, Bam. I don't think I want to Chrome Mox a Grape Shot. We have 2 win conditions in the deck. I think this is just Yaw. Either one of these is viable. Let's go red for Gamble. Yaw. So the remainder of this hand, if we were to play everything out, would involve playing a Vexing Bauble, taking a redraw off a Vexing Bauble, and we could do a large-ish Grape Shot on turn 1, but this one would be a fizzle that we would play more conservatively than that. I am ultimately not impressed with what I am seeing here from this deck list. The stuff that's powerful is the Echo, Gamble, LED, Redraw 7 stuff, and the Multani's Presence, Vexing Bauble, Blood Funeral side of the deck list is like very clearly secondary to that in terms of power level. Let's just turn this into a colorless mana here. I don't think I'm going to play this land. I might want a colored land after doing an Echo. I can do something more broken if I approach this slightly differently. But we are running into this problem where we are a Chrome Mox deck that has a ton of different color requirements to it. So even with some things like City of Brass that in theory help out, your mana isn't always going to be smooth, and if you are trying to gamble for one of 2 combo pieces, it is not always going to work as the tutor you want it to be, like we just saw there. So let's go back to the drawing board once again. Okay, I took a little break from recording to just kind of stew on things for a little while, and I think I can articulate something a lot better now. So let's compare Glimpse of Nature real quick to Multani's Presence plus Vexing Bauble. Glimpse of Nature goes down a card when you cast it, right? You get rid of the Glimpse of Nature from your hand. When you cast your first 0-drop, you break even. When you cast your second 0-drop, you start pulling ahead. With Multani's Presence and Vexing Bauble, you go down a card for Multani's Presence, you go down a card for Vexing Bauble. So when you play 2 0-drops, you break even. When you play 3 0-drops, you start pulling ahead. So a fundamental problem here is that the A plus B combo that we were, 20 some odd % chance to get in our opening hand is not actually netting cards, is not actually doing anything positive until we string 3 cards together. So let's fundamentally shift how we are approaching building around Multani's Presence. What if we try to make it so that the Multani's Presence itself can be good when we draw it? What if we take some sort of existing Enchantress shell, and I just grabbed a list from the Legacy Gambit. What if we take an Enchantress shell where this can just cantrip in the presence of things like Sithis, Argothian Enchantress, and Enchantress's Presence, and it can also be mana for Serra's Sanctum, while the Vexing Baubles can just protect our stuff. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here and rebuild this deck list a bit to see if we can fit in our new combo. So here is a rough sketch for what we might be looking for. So we include our 8 Vexing Bauble Multani's Presence package, and we're going to try running Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble, and these are going to be things that cantrip anyway, and Lotus Petal is perfectly fine. So this means that once we establish these 2 cards, it's perfectly fine and acceptable. Note that we are trying to create something that Goldfish is okay here. I've removed like the Leyline Bindings and the other white mana removal spell that is probably necessary to making this deck list function in actual matches. But again, we are trying to build something that Goldfishes this combo, so let's see how this looks in action. This is an opening hand that I would probably keep in a blind Legacy game. It does not go as fast as possible, but has relatively good redundancy. So we go and we cast something like an Enchantress. Oh, I would need to get another land here. Let's grab white mana. We can then cantrip off a Sithis, getting us a Sarah's Sanctum. We'd pass the turn. Notice our turn count is going up like much, much higher than in the combo versions of this deck list that we were messing around with. So we have these 0-drop artifacts. I could kind of continue going here. Let's just call it a turn here. Let's see if we can effectively win the game on this turn. I think if we're not effectively winning the game this turn, what we're doing here is just not viable enough. We can play a Sarah Sanctum later on in this turn, but notice how these are now not going to be cards that are cantripping with our Enchantress effects, and we do have 3 of them. Let's try cantripping off a Destiny Spinner, get 3 more draws here. There's a Vexing Bauble, but again, this is not necessarily going to be the best on its own. We can get a redraw with it immediately if we would like. Let's try something like this. Yeah, and we are not finding our card to pair with it. I can redraw with it. I can, I guess, Lotus Petal here to continue doing something with actual green mana. And we're drawing lots of cards. I have drawn over half my deck. I have not assembled this A plus B combo yet. I can make a couple more draws, but ultimately, we did not do the thing here. And so with this Enchantress hand, we really would have preferred having some interactive elements so we didn't get run over by something like a Psychic Frog. This is probably an unexciting hand that I ultimately would keep. We make this make green-white so I can cast Sithis just off of this next turn. I'm going to do some marginal deck thinning. So we get a Sithis. I get a Wild Growth. I get a redraw. That's pretty terrible. Yeah, we sort of bottom out this turn. So I can go and grab an Enchantress, call it a turn, hope to get an enchantment in the next turn cycle that does something meaningful. Miss on that. I'm going to say that if we don't have an incredible turn next turn, this game's over. And this is not an enchantment to work with these. Let's try one more Goldfish hand, but this is not feeling like this is a direction worth pursuing. This is not a reasonable opening hand. It just has a bunch of redraws. This I would keep. We're not ready for an Emrakul just yet. We're in a goldfishing game. I can grab a Savannah just to not have to think as much. And I think given the situation that I am in, I would just immediately take both of these redraws. I would like to get to the situation where I cast an Enchantress and a 1-drop next turn. And this is not really what I wanted to be doing. So since this one is an enchantment, it can trigger the Argothian Enchantress. So we'll play that and a Vexing Bauble this turn. So we have Vexing Bauble and a 0-drop, but not the ability to do the Multani's Presence thing. And so I would just have to immediately crack this, take 3 redraws off this. And I think pretty quickly we can see, just through goldfishing a few games, that this Enchantress idea is probably not going to bear fruit. I think even if we added some more fast mana into the deck list, we max out on Lotus Petals or something like that, there's just going to be these tension in between the game plans. I don't think this is worth pursuing further. So I've been goldfishing this deck in a handful of shells now, and we can see that there's some problems. And if we are not really happy with it in the goldfish stage, what is going to happen when our opponents actually start showing up with cards? And here I think it's useful to start thinking about the cards that you are very likely to see within the context of Legacy. So right now, Consigned to Memory is an incredibly popular card. It is 1 mana counter target spell out of the Eldrazi deck. That is fantastic. It is hyper efficient. Well, guess what's going to hit my LEDs or my Vexing Baubles that are central to the deck list. It's not just going to be the generic counter spells that everyone is playing. We are also going to end up with maybe 2 to 3 copies of Consigned to Memory out of many blue decks. While Orcish Bowmasters doesn't have a stranglehold on the format anymore, it's not at that like 30 or so percent, maybe 40% of the format that we were seeing at times. This is still a relatively popular card. Now, people aren't playing that as a 4 of. Psychic Frog has kind of eclipsed that position, but we should be expecting that if we are trying to draw most of our deck, sometimes we are just going to lose to this card, or another similar effect, such as Leovold, or maybe even Spirit of the Labyrinth if someone is playing Death and Taxes. There's a decent amount of non-basic land hate in this format, between Harbinger of the Seas, Magus of the Moon, Sowing Mycospawn, fetching up Wasteland, which is in over half of the decks in the format. So if we are trying to play games centralized around Urza's Saga, or Gaia's Cradle, or Sarah's Sanctum even, if we went down the enchantment route, the stuff that we are doing is not necessarily going to be safe, and it's not necessarily going to line up well versus the format. It's maybe not going to be as hostile as Grief Reanimate Grief would be. We're never beating that in a billion years given the consistency of our deck list. But many of these decks are still going to go and play cards like Thoughtseize to pave the way for their Psychic Frogs to do well. The Eldrazi deck goldfishes incredibly quickly, and I don't know that we beat Sowing Mycospawn, blow up one of your lands the following turn, Sowing Mycospawn, blow up another one of your lands. We have so few lands in this deck list, and if we have any sort of clunky start, I don't know that we're getting there. Without something like Veil of Summer to protect our combo turns, or a defense grid or something like that, I don't know that we are going to beat out these blue decks that have Psychic Frog that can not only just stop our first thing, but then draw a bunch of cards to stop our follow-up attempts as well. So ultimately, after trying it a handful of times, I think this is one of these ideas that we have to go, this one wasn't quite just good enough. The juice was not worth the squeeze. And I think to round this out, why don't we take a look at some successful combo decks in Legacy real quick. So we're just going to look at the top 3 combo deck lists according to MTG Top 8. The first being Blue-Black Reanimator. Let's just grab a random challenge deck list here, and let's zoom in so this is more visible. So while this deck is in the combo section, it is looking to Entomb Reanimate and have a combo kill. Mid-range elements like Psychic Frog, Tamiyo, Brazen Borrower make it so that you don't have to combo. Generic answers such as Daze, Thoughtseize, Force of Will, Force of Negation, Consigned to Memory mean that you have a large safety net and some degree of interaction for your foes. Another very common combo deck list right now is Painter. It has an A plus B combo kill in Painter Servant plus Grindstone, but it's not even maxing out on the Grindstones because it's not trying to go as fast as possible. It has 5-ish main deck Pyroblast effects and a few pieces of interaction beyond that, often something like Lightning Bolts. This is a deck that can play a mid-range game and just happens to have a combo finish that sometimes you do. Hey, another deck list that's real common right now is Nadu, and this is coming in a few different sort of qualities and types right now. But generally speaking, your Nadu is a mid-range card. This just turns all of your creatures into value-oriented creatures, and while you can combo kill, and in fact this version is relatively well suited and built towards comboing, you can just spring Heart Nantucko, maybe bestow it on some cool creature, make a bunch of copies, Gaia's Cradle, keep making copies. You can out mid-range your opponents. And so what we are seeing from many successful combo decks in Legacy right now is that the combo is one thing that you have to worry about, but there is another really solid plan built into the deck. And most of these deck lists that I've been trying to come up with in Goldfish today have not had a great plan B outside of maybe make some Urza Saga construct tokens. When you are playing some sort of Cheerios style deck, you need this critical mass of 0 drops. When you are playing some sort of Storm deck that looks like this one, you need a critical mass of 0 mana cards. And because the various packages that we are shoving into these deck lists require so many cards, there's not as much room for a plan B. So I think that's what I have to say about this one. If you all want to try to break Multani's presence with Vexing Bauble, I wish you luck. I couldn't quite do it. Kill a Bee couldn't quite do it. Maybe you can. But I hope today was a really interesting thought experiment, and maybe it taught you about something about deck building along the way. If you have some thoughts that I didn't explore, feel free to throw those down in the comments below. I would love to read them, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya!